behaving like a girl? Are you a baby? Why are you crying like a girl? Okay, so which of these have you heard before? Myth number 1. Girls grieve more than boys. This is a general belief that is not necessarily true around grief when it comes to adolescents. Now, what a myth. Myths are generally held belief about an idea, about something, a story that is not necessarily true. It's held by a lot of people. It's popularly held, but they are not necessarily true. Ask people, what's the origin of this belief? Where did you get this from? Sometimes they don't even know. I mean, maybe the answer will be, we met it here. Like, that's what people say, or, well, sometimes in some cases, it can be as a result of life experiences. But a lot of times, they are popularly held and they are not necessarily true. Now, all these are stereotypes. In case you're listening to me for the first time, my name is Owosina. I am a professional counselor and your adolescent counselor. I am at the Family Counselor on Instagram. You want to follow me? Now, stereotypes are mistaken ideas that are overgeneralized. So a lot of times they are not true. To the person that holds that it is true though, well, that's a different conversation. But the idea of the stereotype itself, the myth, the bias itself, the idea of it is necessarily not true, but it is generally held. It is popularly held. It has been long-standing, all right? It has been here for a long time, but they are not true. And these myths inform our attitude towards things. Now, as grief of adolescents is concerned, this myth we have that girls grieve more than boys influences our attitude towards young people that are bereaved. Okay, so demystifying, which is what this video is about, demystifying some of this myth will help us to begin to see grief differently and begin to then perhaps respond differently, behave differently, support people even more effectively when it comes to bereavement and adolescents. Humans experience emotion in different ways, irrespective of where they fall on the spectrum of gender. So male, female does not really matter. Yes, I understand the place of biology. Biology has done a good job to distinguish for us uniquely a male as separate from a female. Fantastic. But this conversation is about feelings, how feeling is showing up for an adolescent and how an adolescent is now acting based on how feeling is showing up. So how an adolescent is choosing to grieve based on how that feeling is showing up for him. Now, I'm saying that what influences how this feeling is showing up for an adolescent is not whether he's a male or she's a female. It's based on many things. Worldview, especially. Now, this worldview then influences the interpretation the adolescent gives to that experience of loss. In my last video, if you haven't watched it, you want to look for it, effect of grief on adolescent behavior. All right? I shared in it as well, and I'm going to say again here that depending on the depth of relationship with the departed person, depending on the length of the relationship, depending on the robustness of that relationship, all of this will work together to inform the impact, to determine the impact of the loss of the child. Now, so how that child interprets this loss is based on where the child is coming from, how the child grew up, the resilience, if possible, that the child has built over the years. There's many things, around the child, and these things they are not straitjacket for everyone. It's not because it's a girl or a boy. So if a girl, peradventure, has been subjected to stringent upbringing and adversity, this girl would behave, emotion will show up for the girl in a certain way. if a boy has been taken through stringent upbringing and adversity, as it were, emotion will show up for this boy in a certain way. And so also, if a girl has been, grew up with so much pleasantness and blissfulness around her life, emotion will show up in a certain way for the girl. And the same way, if a boy is being taken through pleasantness, so much pleasantness and so much blissfulness around his life, emotion will show up in certain ways. It wouldn't matter the gender. What would matter is how the child is interpreting. And interpreting will depend on where the child is coming from. So you see? So my question to you today is, as a concerned parent, as a teen guide, as a parent, as an educator, you have an adolescent in your care. My question to you today is, can we begin to allow young people, especially adolescents, to begin to be human first and not cast them into the mold of a male or a female when it comes to how emotion is showing up for them and how they are choosing to grieve? Grieving can take different forms. Some people choose to grieve in more expressive ways based on where they're coming from, like I explained, and some can choose to grieve in more cognitive way. The ones that are choosing to grieve in cognitive ways, they won't say anything to anybody. They will take decision, deep-seated decision. They can say things like, okay, no one will ever experience this kind of thing again in my community. And they take on a project and they run with it. Some may say, oh, in my family, this will never happen, or this will then begin to happen. And the person will just will be pursued by that ideology and will run with it. So you see that person who is not expressing it to anybody, yeah, but is making decisions and taking actions. That's the person's way of dealing with, of grieving. That's the person's way of grieving. So if a person chooses to express it openly, such a person can go on social media to talk about it, can, do things openly and all of that. It's not to say that the person that is not saying anything is not grieving. So my question again, which is what I'm leaving you with, can we begin to allow people to be human beings first and not cast them into the mold of gender and allow them to grieve how they want to grieve? Thank you very much for listening to me. I'll see you again in my next video. Remember to drop your questions. If you have a question about grief, you have a grieving adolescent, you have some questions around it, please drop it in the comment section, or you can send me a DM and I'll be glad to take your questions. Thank you, and I'll see you again next time. God bless you.